The transport ship shuddered as it docked with Kepler Station. Lisa Grant pressed her face against the small window and watched the massive space station grow larger. She had never seen anything so big. The station stretched for miles in every direction, covered in lights and antenna arrays that blinked like stars. Lisa picked up her single bag and joined the line of cadets walking toward the exit. She was shorter than most of them. At 5 feet 6 inches, she felt tiny next to the other species. The Krathuri cadets towered over everyone else, their bodies covered in thick shell-like armor. Their 4 arms moved constantly as they talked in clicking sounds. The Veltar were tall and thin, their green skin seeming to glow under the ship's lights. The Durnian cadets looked like walking rocks, short but incredibly wide and strong. She was one of only 3 humans on the entire transport. The other 2 humans, both male cadets named Jake Miller and Tony Adams, had ignored her during the whole trip. They seemed embarrassed to be seen with her. Lisa did not care. She had not come this far to make friends. The docking bay was enormous. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of different worlds stood in neat rows. Lisa found her place in the formation and stood straight. Around her, the alien cadets whispered and pointed. She heard the word human spoken in several different languages, always with the same tone of disgust. A massive Krathuri officer stepped onto a platform in front of the formation. He was at least 7 feet tall, with scars covering his shell and 4 arms that ended in sharp claws. When he spoke, his voice boomed through speakers around the bay. "I am Instructor Velkoth," he announced. "For the next 6 months, you will call this station home. Most of you will not survive the training. Those who do will join the Interstellar Peacekeeping Force as officers. Those who fail will return home in shame." His 4 eyes swept across the formation and stopped when they found Lisa. "Some species," he said, his voice filled with contempt, "send their best warriors to this academy. Others send their bravest soldiers. And some," his eyes locked onto Lisa, "send their rejects." Laughter rippled through the alien cadets. Lisa kept her face blank and continued staring straight ahead. She had heard worse insults growing up in the ruins of Detroit after the war. "Humans," Velkoth continued, "are weak, emotional, and unpredictable. They have no business training alongside real warriors. They are only here because their government begged for spots in our academy." More laughter from the cadets. "But we will treat them the same as everyone else. We will break them just as easily." The instructor began reading squad assignments. Lisa listened as cadets were assigned to squads. 1 through 6. These were the elite squads, filled with the strongest and smartest cadets from each species. When her name was finally called, she was not surprised. Lisa Grant, human female, assigned to Squad 7. Squad 7 was known throughout the academy as the washout squad. It was where they put cadets who were expected to fail. Lisa walked to where the other Squad 7 members were gathering. There were 12 of them total, and she could see why they had been placed together. Most looked scared or weak compared to the other cadets. Her squad leader was Cadet Zix, an Aquarian whose skin was pale blue and constantly wet. He had 6 tentacle arms that never stopped moving. Next to him stood Cadet Roth, a silicate whose body looked like it was made of living crystal. Light seemed to bend around him in strange ways. The 3rd member was Cadet Cree, an Avarian with bright red feathers and hollow bones that made her look fragile. "So you are the human," Zix said, his voice bubbling like he was speaking underwater. "I have heard about your species. You come from a death world, yes?" "Earth is dangerous," Lisa replied simply. "But so am I." Kree's feathers ruffled with what Lisa assumed was laughter. "You are very small for something dangerous." "Size does not matter where I come from," Lisa said. "Only whether you survive." The next week was hell. The instructors seemed determined to break every cadet, but they paid special attention to Squad 7. The gravity chambers were set higher than normal when it was their turn. The combat simulations were made harder. The endurance courses seemed to go on forever. Lisa watched as her squad mates began to crack under the pressure. 3 cadets quit on the second day. 2 more gave up on the 4th day. By the end of the first week, only half of Squad 7 remained. Lisa was still there. Every morning, she woke up sore and exhausted. Every night, she fell asleep planning how to do better the next day. The alien cadets whispered that she was too stubborn to know when she was beaten. The instructors waited for her to break, but Lisa had grown up in a world that had tried to kill her every day. She had learned to fix broken machines with her bare hands. She had learned to fight for every scrap of food, every safe place to sleep. The academy was hard, but it was nothing compared to the streets of Detroit after the bombs fell. On the 7th day, Instructor Velkoff called Squad 7 to his office. The remaining 6 cadets stood at attention while he walked around them like a predator circling prey. "You have survived 1 week," he said. "Do not think this makes you special. The real training begins now. From this point forward, we will separate the warriors from the pretenders." His 4 eyes focused on Lisa again. "Especially you, human. Your species has fooled some people into thinking you are dangerous, but I have fought in real wars. I know what real warriors look like. You are not one of them." Lisa stared straight ahead and said nothing. But inside, she smiled. Let the alien think she was weak. Let him underestimate her. She had survived worse than anything this academy could throw at her. She had no idea how wrong she was. 3 weeks had passed since Lisa arrived at the academy. Squad 7 now had only 4 members left. The others had either quit or been kicked out for failing too many tests. Lisa looked around the small table in the mess hall where she sat with her remaining squad mates. Cadet Zix was picking at his food with 2 of his tentacles while the other 4 held different eating tools. His blue skin looked paler than usual. Cadet Roth sat perfectly still, his crystal body reflecting the lights above them in rainbow patterns. Cadet Cree was preening her red feathers, a nervous habit Lisa had noticed when the bird-like alien was worried. "I heard Squad 3 lost 2 more cadets yesterday," Zix said, his voice bubbling. "The combat simulations are getting harder every day." "At least they get fair tests," Cree chirped, her voice high and musical. "Did you see what they made us do in the obstacle course?" "The walls were twice as high as everyone else had to climb." Lisa said nothing. She had noticed the same thing. Every test seemed designed to be harder for Squad 7. The instructors claimed it was to push the weak cadets harder, but Lisa knew better. They were trying to break them. "Attention, Squad 7, a voice called from behind them. They turned to see Instructor Velkoff approaching their table. His 4 arms were crossed, and his mandibles clicked together in what Lisa had learned was a sign of annoyance. "Report to Training Bay 12 in 1 hour," he said. "You will be participating in a special exercise." "What kind of exercise, sir?" Zix asked. Velkoff's 4 eyes focused on the Aquarian. "A hostage rescue simulation. The kind of mission real officers face in the field." His gaze moved to Lisa. "We will see if any of you have what it takes to handle real combat situations." After the instructor left, the 4 cadets looked at each other nervously. Hostage rescue was advanced training, usually reserved for senior cadets who had already passed basic combat courses. Squad 7 had barely finished their first month. "This does not feel right," Roth said, his voice sounding like wind chimes. "Why are they giving us advanced training when we have not finished the basics?" Lisa had been thinking the same thing. Something was wrong about this whole situation, but she could not put her finger on what it was. An hour later, they stood outside Training Bay 12. The facility was one of the largest on the station, designed to simulate real buildings and city streets. Lisa had seen other squads go in for training, but never Squad 7. Instructor Velkoff met them at the entrance along with two other instructors Lisa did not recognize. One was a tall, thin Veltar with dark green skin. The other was a Durnian, who looked like a walking boulder. "Listen carefully," Velkoff said. "Inside this facility, there are 6 hostages being held by enemy forces. Your mission is to rescue all hostages without casualties. You will be issued training weapons with simulation rounds. The OPFOR will also be using simulation ammunition." He handed each of them a weapon and a small device that would beep if they were killed during the exercise. Lisa checked her weapon carefully. It looked and felt like a real pulse rifle, but the ammunition counter showed it was loaded with training. Rounds that would sting but not seriously injure. "Remember," the Veltar instructor said, "this is just training. Follow standard procedures and work as a team. The exercise will end when all hostages are secure or all cadets are eliminated." The 4 cadets moved to the entrance of the facility. Through the heavy blast doors, Lisa could see a maze of corridors and rooms designed to look like a space station or ship interior. Red emergency lights flashed, and she could hear the sound of fake alarms in the distance. "Stay together," she whispered to her teammates. "Watch the corners and check every room." They moved through the entrance and into the facility. Lisa took point, with Zix and Roth covering the sides and Kree watching their backs. The corridors were dark except for the emergency lighting, and their footsteps echoed off the metal walls. They had been moving for about 10 minutes when Lisa heard something that made her freeze. A sound that did not belong in a training exercise. The whine of a charging weapon that was definitely not loaded with simulation rounds. "Get down!" she shouted, diving to the side just as the wall behind her exploded in a shower of sparks and metal fragments. Real weapons. Real ammunition. This was not a training exercise. Lisa rolled behind a support beam as another shot rang out. This one hit Zix in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the floor. But instead of the beep that should have indicated a simulated hit, there's only the Aquarian scream of pain and the smell of burned flesh. "Zix!" Kree cried out, starting to move toward their wounded teammate. "Stay down!" Lisa shouted. "Those are real weapons." But it was too late. As she moved to help Zix, Lisa had to step out from behind her cover. The first shot hit her in the left shoulder, the impact spinning her around and slamming her into the wall. The pain was immediate and intense, nothing like the mild sting of training rounds. She tried to find new cover, but the second shot caught her in the ribs. The force knocked the air out of her lungs and sent her stumbling. She could taste blood in her mouth and feel it running down her side. The third shot hit her in the right thigh as she tried to crawl behind an overturned table. The pain was so sharp it made her vision blur, but she managed to pull herself to safety behind the metal surface. From her hiding place, she could hear voices coming through the facility's communication system. Instructor Velkoff's voice was calm and professional. "Control, this is Instructor Velkoff. We have had an unfortunate training accident in Bay 12. The human cadet appears to have been eliminated by hostile fire. All remaining cadets should return to base immediately for debriefing." Lisa pressed her hand against the wound in her shoulder and felt warm blood flowing between her fingers. She could hear her squad mates moving around, but their voices sounded confused and frightened. "Lisa?" Kree called out softly. "Lisa, are you alive?" She wanted to answer, but something told her to stay quiet. Through the pain and shock, her mind was starting to work again. This whole thing had been planned. They had not brought Squad 7 here for training. They had brought them here to die. More specifically, they had brought her here to die. Over the comm system, she heard Velkoff's voice again. "All cadets evacuate immediately. The exercise is over. Medical teams are en route." But Lisa knew no medical teams were coming, at least not for her. She lay still behind the table, listening to her squad mates' footsteps as they moved toward the exit. She did not blame them for leaving. They thought she was dead, and they were probably right to run. The facility fell silent except for the sound of her own breathing, and the fake alarm still echoing through the corridors. Lisa Grant closed her eyes and took inventory of her wounds. Shoulder shot was through and through, painful but not fatal. The rib shot had cracked bone but missed anything vital. The leg wound was the worst, but the bullet had missed the major artery. She had been hurt worse than this before. Much worse. Lisa opened her eyes and looked around the room. The people who had tried to kill her thought she was dead. They thought they could murder a human cadet and call it a training accident. They thought they knew what humans were capable of. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Lisa lay behind the overturned table and counted to 37. Not because she was dying, but because she was thinking. Her father had taught her this trick when she was young. When someone is trying to kill you, you do not panic. You think. The people who shot her believed she was dead. Good, let them think that. Dead people could not fight back. Dead people were not dangerous. But Lisa Grant was not dead, and she was very dangerous. She tore strips of cloth from her uniform and began binding her wounds. The shoulder wound hurt the most, but it was clean. The bullet had gone straight through without hitting bone. She wrapped it tight to stop the bleeding. The rib shot had cracked something inside, but she could still breathe. The leg wound was messy, but not deep enough to hit the big blood vessels. Growing up in Detroit after the resource wars had taught her many things. How to fix broken machines with scraps of metal. How to find food in empty buildings. How to treat wounds when there were no doctors. How to fight when fighting was the only way to survive. Lisa pulled herself into a sitting position and looked around the room. The training facility was designed to look like a real space station, complete with maintenance tunnels and service corridors. She had grown up crawling through similar spaces in the ruins of her city. This place was like home. She heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy boots, moving carefully. They were coming back to check if she was really dead. Lisa smiled. It was not a nice smile. Moving as quietly as she could, Lisa crawled toward a maintenance hatch in the wall. Her leg protested with every movement, but she ignored the pain. Pain was just information, her father used to say. It tells you something is wrong, but it does not tell you to quit. The hatch opened easily. Inside was a narrow tunnel filled with pipes and cables. Lisa pulled herself in and closed the hatch behind her just as the footsteps entered the room. Through the metal, she could hear voices. "Where is the body?" someone asked. The voice sounded human, but with an accent she did not recognize. "She was right here," another voice replied. This one was definitely alien, speaking in the clicking language of the Crothery. "I saw her fall. Well, she is not here now. Find her." Lisa crawled through the maintenance tunnel, following the layout she had memorized from the facility maps during their briefing. The tunnel system connected to every room in the complex. From here, she could go anywhere without being seen. Made her way to what the map showed as a storage room. Inside, she found exactly what she was looking for. The facility kept spare equipment for training exercises. Weapons, armor, tools, and medical supplies. Lisa quickly bandaged her wounds properly and took several items that might be useful. A maintenance tool that could cut through metal, emergency medical supplies, and most importantly, a small device used to override electronic locks. She had learned to use similar tools as a child, breaking into abandoned buildings to find shelter. From the storage room, Lisa moved back into the tunnel system. She could hear her hunters moving through the facility above her, searching room by room. They were being methodical, but they were also being loud. They thought they were hunting a wounded animal that was trying to hide. They were wrong. They were not the hunters anymore. They were the prey. Lisa found her first target in what looked like a security office. He was a human male, probably hired security rather than academy staff. He sat at a desk watching video screens that showed different parts of the facility. All the screens showed empty rooms. He had no idea she was already behind him. Lisa had learned to move silently in the ruins of Detroit. Broken glass and twisted metal everywhere meant that one wrong step could alert the gangs that controlled the streets. She approached the guard from behind, moving like a shadow. The man never knew what hit him. Lisa used a sleeper hold her father had taught her, cutting off blood flow to his brain. The guard went limp in less than 10 seconds. She tied him up with cables from the maintenance kit and took his weapon and communication device. Station 2, report. A voice crackled from the communicator. Lisa keyed the transmitter and spoke in a low, raspy voice. Station 2, all clear. No movement in Sector 7. Copy that. Continue sweep. Now she knew they were using radio communication. That was a mistake. Lisa had grown up listening to radio chatter from the various gangs and military units that fought over Detroit. She knew how to use their own communications against them. Moving through the tunnels, she made her way to the facility's main power distribution center. The room was filled with electrical panels and backup generators. Lisa smiled. This was exactly like the power system she had learned to repair in the ruins. Using the maintenance tool, she began carefully rewiring the electrical system. Not to shut it down, but to take control of it. Within minutes, she had access to the facility's lighting, ventilation, and security systems. With a few more modifications, she could control them remotely using the stolen communicator. All stations. Report status, came a voice over the radio. Lisa recognized it as Instructor Velkoth. One by one, the security teams reported in. Station 1 was covering the main entrance. Station 3 was searching the training rooms. Station 4 was checking the upper levels. Station 2 remained silent. Station 2, respond, Velkoth demanded. Lisa keyed the transmitter again. Station 2 had an accident. He will not be responding anymore. Silence filled the radio channel. Then Velkoth's voice, no longer calm and professional. Find her now. Lisa began moving again, this time toward Station 3's last reported position. The security team there consisted of 2 guards, both human. They were checking rooms methodically, but they were nervous now. They knew something had happened to their colleague. Lisa reached a junction in the tunnel system directly above where the guards were searching. Through a ventilation grate, she could see them moving carefully through a training room below. They were standing back to back, weapons ready, scanning for threats. Lisa unscrewed the ventilation grate and dropped a small metal object into the room. The guards immediately spun toward the sound, weapons raised. While they were distracted, Lisa dropped through the opening behind them. The first guard turned just in time to see her coming. His eyes went wide with shock. The small human female, who was supposed to be dead, was very much alive, and she looked absolutely furious. He tried to raise his weapon, but Lisa was already moving. She had learned to fight on the streets of Detroit, where being small meant you had to be fast and smart. She kicked the first guard's knee, hyperextending it with a wet pop. As he fell, she grabbed his weapon and used it to block the second guard's shot. The second guard was bigger and stronger, but Lisa had grown up fighting people who were bigger and stronger. She rolled under his next shot and came up inside his reach. A quick strike to his throat left him gasping for air. A follow-up blow to the back of his head sent him to the floor unconscious. Lisa collected their weapons and communication devices. Over the radio, she could hear the remaining teams growing more panicked. Station 3 report. Lisa keyed the transmitter. Station 3 is no longer operational. You should run now while you still can. Impossible, Velkoth's voice crackled. You are just one human. You are wounded. You cannot fight trained soldiers. Lisa looked around the room at the unconscious guards. She thought about her father, who had taught her to survive in a world that wanted her dead. She thought about her mother, who had shown her that being small did not mean being weak. She thought about every day she had spent growing up in hell and choosing to keep living anyway. "You are right," she said into the communicator. "I am just one human, but you forgot something important about humans. We do not know when to quit." She turned off the radio and began moving toward the next target. The hunters were about to learn what happened when you tried to kill something from a death world. They were about to learn why humans were called Deathworlders. In the Academy's command center, alarms were screaming. Red warning lights flashed across dozens of computer screens as security systems throughout Training Bay 12 reported failures and breaches. Academy Commandant Trixal stood behind the control stations, his green Veltar skin darker than usual with worry. "Report," he commanded. "Sir, we have lost contact with all security teams in the training facility," reported a young Crothery officer. "The last transmission was 30 minutes ago." "What about the surveillance cameras?" "Most are offline, sir. Someone has been systematically disabling them from inside the facility. The few that remain show empty corridors." Commandant Trixal turned to Instructor Velkoth, who stood at the back of the room looking increasingly nervous. "Instructor, explain to me how a routine training exercise has resulted in complete loss of communication with an entire facility." Velkoth's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "Sir, there must have been a malfunction with the training equipment. Perhaps the human cadet was more seriously injured than we thought and activated some kind of emergency protocol." The commandant studied the instructor with eyes that had seen 3 wars and countless lies. "Emergency protocol?" "The human cadet who was supposed to be eliminated in your training accident." "Sir, I do not understand what you are implying." Before Trixal could respond, one of the remaining security cameras flickered to life. On the screen, they could see Lisa Grant moving through a corridor near the facility's armory. She was limping but moving with purpose. Her uniform was torn and bloody, but her eyes were clear and focused. "She is alive," someone whispered as they watched Lisa reach the armory door. The heavy metal barrier was designed to keep unauthorized personnel out of the weapon storage area. Lisa examined the electronic lock for a moment, then pulled out a small device and connected it to the control panel. "Impossible," Velkoth said. "That lock requires command-level authorization." On screen, the armory door slid open. Lisa disappeared. Inside, "Sir," the young officer called out, "I am reading massive power fluctuations throughout the facility. Someone is rerouting electrical systems to the maintenance network." Commandant Trixal had served alongside human soldiers during the Hive War. He had seen what they could do when cornered. "Seal the facility. Full lockdown. Nothing gets in or out." "Sir, our people are still inside." "Our people should have thought of that before they tried to murder a cadet," Trixal said quietly. His voice carried across the silent command center. "Yes, Instructor Velkoth, I know exactly what this is. The question is whether your hired killers can finish the job before that human tears your facility apart." Velkoth started to protest, but the commandant raised a hand for silence. On the screens, new alarms were beginning to sound. The facility's blast doors were engaging, sealing every entrance and exit. Training Bay 12 was now completely isolated from the rest of the station. Inside the facility, Lisa Grant stood in the middle of the armory, surrounded by enough weapons to fight a small war. She had taken what she needed and was now working on the room's computer terminal. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls, accessing systems she had no business knowing how to operate. But Lisa had grown up breaking into buildings that did not want her inside. Every abandoned factory and collapsed office building in Detroit had taught her something about security systems and computer networks. The Academy's systems were more advanced, but the basic principles were the same. She uploaded a virus she had written using code her father had taught her. The program began spreading through the facility's network, giving her access to every system connected to the main computer. Lights, ventilation, communications, and most importantly, the blast doors that were meant to keep her trapped. Over the facility's speakers, her voice echoed through every corridor. "Attention Academy Command. This is Cadet Lisa Grant. I am declaring this facility under human control. You have exactly 10 minutes to surrender the people responsible for this attack, or I will demonstrate why humans are considered a warrior species." In the command center, officers looked at each other in shock. A single wounded cadet was holding an entire training facility hostage. "She is bluffing," Velkoth said, but his voice lacked conviction. "One human cannot threaten an entire academy." "Commandant." Trixall did not answer. He was watching the security feeds and remembering stories from the war. Stories about human soldiers who refused to surrender even when faced with impossible odds. Stories about humans who turned certain defeat into victory through sheer stubborn determination. On the screens, they could see Lisa moving toward the facility's main blast door. The barrier was 6 inches of reinforced titanium steel composite, designed to withstand direct hits from military-grade weapons. It weighed several tons and was controlled by powerful hydraulic systems. Lisa stood in front of the door and placed her hands on the frame. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she began to pull. The metal started to groan under stress it was never designed to handle. Warning alarms began screaming as sensors detected impossible force readings. The door's frame began to buckle and twist. "That is impossible," the young officer whispered. "No organic being has that kind of strength." But Commandant Trixall knew better. Humans came from a world with higher gravity than most inhabited planets. Their bones were denser, their muscles stronger. And this particular human had grown up in conditions that would kill most other species. The groaning of tortured metal grew louder. Sparks began flying from the door's control systems as the frame warped beyond design tolerances. Lisa's face was set in concentration, every muscle in her body straining against the barrier. With a sound like thunder, the blast door tore free of its housing. Lisa stumbled backward as several tons of twisted metal crashed to the floor behind her. Emergency lighting flickered as damaged power cables sparked and failed. Lisa stepped through the ruined doorway, carrying a piece of the doorframe like a trophy. Her uniform was soaked with blood from her wounds, but she walked with the steady pace of someone who had just completed a simple task. Behind her, the training facility was in ruins. Security systems sparked and failed. Lights flickered randomly as her virus continued spreading through the computer network. Emergency alarms wailed like dying animals. Lisa Grant, human cadet from Squad 7, walked toward the Academy's main section. She had a message to deliver, and she was going to deliver it in person. In the command center, complete silence fell. Every officer, regardless of species, stared at the screens in shock. They had just watched a single human tear through 6 inches of reinforced metal with her bare hands. "Sir," the young officer said quietly, "should we evacuate the academy?" "Commandant." Trixall shook his head. "No, we are going to let her come to us. And then we are going to listen to what she has to say." He turned to face Instructor Velkoth, who was backing toward the exit. "As for you, I suggest you start thinking about how you are going to explain this to the Human Alliance. Because if I know humans, they are not going to be happy when they learn what happened here." Outside the command center, alarms began sounding throughout the academy. Students and staff stopped what they were doing and stared as a small, bloody human female walked through corridors that were supposed to be secure. She moved with the steady determination of someone who had a job to finish, and everyone who saw her understood the same thing. They were not looking at a victim anymore. They were looking at a force of nature that had been awakened and was now coming to collect what was owed. They were looking at a Deathworlder who had decided that enough was enough. The main training hall of the Galactic Defense Academy had never been so quiet. 200 cadets from dozens of different worlds stood in perfect silence as the massive doors opened. Through the entrance walked a small human female, dragging behind her a twisted piece of metal that had once been part of a blast door. Lisa Grant limped into the center of the hall and dropped the metal, with a crash that echoed through the enormous space. Blood stained her torn uniform, and her left arm hung at an awkward angle, but her eyes were clear and focused. She looked around at the assembled cadets and instructors with the calm expression of someone who had just finished a difficult but necessary job. Every alien in the room stared at her in shock. They had heard the alarms. They had seen the emergency broadcasts. But seeing the small human standing before them, battered but unbroken, made the reality hit home. One cadet had just fought her way through an entire military facility and won. "Attention!" came a voice from the platform at the front of the hall. Instructor Velkoff stepped forward, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of authority. "Security teams, arrest this cadet immediately. She has violated Academy regulations and destroyed Academy property." 20 armed guards moved toward Lisa from different directions. Their weapons were drawn, and their faces showed the determination of professional soldiers following orders. But before they could take more than a few steps, another voice rang. Out across the hall, "Stand down." Commandant Trixal emerged from the entrance behind Lisa, his green Veltar skin pale with exhaustion. The old warrior walked slowly across the hall, his eyes never leaving the human cadet who stood surrounded, but unafraid. "Sir," Velkoff protested, "this cadet has committed serious crimes. She must be arrested and punished." "The only crime here," Trixal said quietly, "was attempted murder. And you are the one who committed it." Gasps echoed through the hall as cadets and instructors processed what the commandant had just said. Velkoff's mandibles clicked rapidly, and his forearms gestured in agitation. "Sir, I do not know what this human has told you, but she is clearly delusional from her injuries. There was a training accident, nothing more." Trixel stopped directly in front of Lisa and studied her carefully. Her shoulder was still bleeding through the makeshift bandage. Her ribs were probably cracked. Her leg showed clear signs of a bullet wound, but she stood straight and met his gaze without flinching. "Cadet Grant," he said formally, "report on your training exercise." Lisa's voice was hoarse but clear as it carried across the silent hall. "Sir, at approximately 1400 hours, Squad 7 was ordered to participate in a hostage rescue simulation in Training Bay 12. Upon entering the facility, we were fired upon with live ammunition by personnel claiming to be opposition forces." She paused to catch her breath, but her voice remained steady. "I sustained 3 gunshot wounds. My squad mates were ordered to evacuate and abandon the exercise. I was left for dead in what Instructor Velkoff announced as a training accident. And then?" Trixel prompted. "I neutralized the hostile forces, took control of the facility, and reported here for further orders, sir." The simplicity of her report made it somehow more impressive. No boasting about her accomplishments, no complaints about being shot. Just a basic description of what had happened, as if fighting her way through armed opponents while wounded was a normal part of cadet training. "How many hostile forces did you neutralize?" the commandant asked. 8, sir. All are alive, but unconscious. I also caused significant damage to facility systems and infrastructure during the operation." Trixel nodded slowly. "And the blast door?" "It was in my way, sir." A sound rippled through the assembled cadets. It took a moment for Lisa to realize they were laughing. Not at her, but with a mixture of amazement and disbelief. The idea that someone would tear through a blast door because it was inconvenient was so perfectly human that even the alien cadets could appreciate it. "Sir," Velkoff said desperately, "surely you cannot believe this fantastic story." One wounded cadet against trained soldiers. It is impossible. I have reviewed the security footage, Trixel replied. All of it. Including the recordings that show you and your accomplices planning this attack 3 days ago. The instructor's forearms dropped to his sides as the color drained from his chitinous face. Around the hall, other instructors who had been standing with him began backing away, realizing they were witnessing the end of a conspiracy. Why? Lisa asked quietly. The question was directed at Velkoff, but her voice carried across the hall. Why did you try to kill me? Velkoff's mandibles clicked once before he answered. Because humans do not belong here. You are weak and emotional. You come from a primitive world and think you can stand alongside real warriors. Someone had to show the galaxy that humans are not the threat they pretend to be. Lisa considered this for a moment. Then she walked over to the piece of blast door she had been dragging and picked it up with one hand. The metal was easily 3 feet long and weighed more than most cadets could lift with both arms. You are right about one thing, she said, holding the twisted metal like it was a simple tool. Humans are emotional. Right now I am very angry. But you are wrong about us being weak. She tossed the metal fragment to Velkoff, who caught it with all 4 of his arms and immediately staggered under its weight. Humans do not just survive impossible situations. We turn them into advantages. We do not just endure pain. We use it to make ourselves stronger. And we do not just face our enemies. We hunt them down and make them regret ever threatening us. The hall was completely silent as Lisa continued. You wanted to prove that humans do not belong in your academy. You just proved the opposite. You gave me your best facility, your best weapons, and your best soldiers. And I walked through all of them like they were not even there. She turned to address the assembled cadets, her voice growing stronger with each word. This is what humans do. We get knocked down and we get back up. We get shot and we keep fighting. We face impossible odds and we find a way to win. Not because we are the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but because we never, ever give up. Commandant Trixel stepped forward. Instructor Velkoff, you are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, and conduct on becoming an officer. Guards, escort him to the detention center. As the disgraced instructor was led away, Trixel turned back to Lisa. Cadet Grant, you are hereby promoted to squad leader and transferred to Squad 1. Your performance today demonstrates exactly why the Human Alliance was invited to join this academy. Sir, Lisa said, swaying slightly as exhaustion began to catch up with her. With respect, I would like to stay with Squad 7. They are my teammates, and they did not abandon me by choice. The Commandant smiled, the first time anyone could. Remember seeing him do so. Very well. Squad 7 is hereby redesignated as an advanced training unit. All members will receive accelerated promotion and specialized instruction. As medical personnel finally arrived to treat Lisa's wounds, word of what had happened began spreading throughout the academy. The small human who had been expected to wash out in the first week had just redefined what it meant to be a warrior. Over the following months, applications to the academy from human candidates increased by 300%. Other species began requesting human instructors for their most difficult training programs. And Cadet Lisa Grant became the first human ever to graduate at the top of her class. But more importantly, the galaxy learned a lesson that would be remembered for generations. When you corner a human, you have not won a victory. You have just made a very dangerous enemy who will stop at nothing to prove you wrong. And sometimes, that enemy will tear down walls to get to you.